But you'll find out that the paranormal stuff is not by itself all that meaningful. But what it does do that's good is it gives you practice trying to focus and develop your intuitive side, which will give you perspective. You'll see a bigger reality. That will give you a little humility because you'll see yourself as just a small part in something very meaningful, yet very much bigger than you are.
I have a question because it's a big theory of everything. And how can one make this theory of everything his own? Because it's one can read your books, but how can one get certainty of this reality?
Well, there's a statement that I often say, and that's written in my books a lot, and that is that if it's not your experience, then it can't be your truth. You have to experience it. If you just read about it, then you can believe it or not believe it. Or you can even give it a probability. Well, I sort of believe it maybe 50-50. But if it's not your experience, then it's not your truth. It can't be yours. So how do you experience it? How do you know it's like this? Go experience it. You're a piece of consciousness. You can get out and explore that larger consciousness system. You can learn to explore consciousness. Your consciousness has two separate paths by which it processes information. One is intellect and one is intuition, intuitive path. All of the paranormal things, all of the things that lie outside of the physical realm come through the intuitive path. You cannot go out of body through the intellectual path. It doesn't work that way. You can't remote view through the intellectual path. You have to learn to do that through the intuitive path. Now, every human has that ability to develop their intuition, their intuitive side. That's why we have two hemispheres. One's more for processing on the intellectual side, the other's more processing on the intuitive side. Okay, so we don't develop our intuitive side very much. We develop our intellectual side. Matter of fact, we spend our whole life honing and polishing our intellectual side, getting more and more information, more and more intellectual understanding. Our intuitive side, if you're a scientist, you don't even believe there is an intuitive side. You think intuition is an illusion. There is no intuitive side. Actually, if you're a materialist, you have to believe that there is no consciousness, no time, and no free will. You have to say all those things are just illusions, because a determinist would have to say those were all illusions. And a materialist must be a determinist. So in any case, if you develop that intuitive side, then you'll know, you'll have experience. Just all that research I did over those 40 years of doing research in the non-physical, I just did because I was taught with Bob Monroe and had learned on my own to be able to develop that intuitive side to where I could go there and go there very precisely. You can't do research if every time you go it's totally different. You have to be able to get an exact same altered state of consciousness and go through the exact same things in the exact same way. Otherwise, this holding all the variables still except for one doesn't work. So it took a lot of practice. But then, like I said, I was putting 15 to 20 hours a week in over 5 to 7 years. It takes time to develop that kind of intuitive side. So you have to develop, but you can. Everyone can. It just takes an interest and do it. So not your experiences can't be your truth. Go find out. But now you can apply the theory and see how it applies to you. And I've known many hundreds of people who have not really worried about the theory. They don't care much about theory. Theory schmeary, who cares? How do I apply it to my life? And these people went to work on their fear. So they work on their fear and they find fears and get rid of the fears. And what do they find when they do that? Wow, life gets so much better. They walk through life so much lighter, burdens disappear from them. They understand things better. The relationships with everybody get better, with their significant other, with their children, with their boss. Everything just improves in their life as they get rid of these fears. So that's just applying the model or applying the theory to your life and seeing what happens. And I can tell you from lots of experience that that's exactly what happens is, your life just changes completely. But now people have trouble getting rid of their fears because they have to change themselves. Again, this is not trying to make you act like you're a nicer person and kinder and gentler. You're having to be a nicer person. So we're really talking about change at a very deep level of who you are. And that takes some effort. And these fears are deep. They're ingrained. We have this ego that tries to make the fears disappear. We pretend that things are not the way they are so that we can pretend that we don't really have those fears. I've run across any number of young, mostly males in their 20s and 30s who say, fear? I don't have any fear. Can't think of any fear I have at all. Ego? No, I don't think I have much of that either. Beliefs? No, I'm agnostic. Well, I don't have any beliefs. And they feel that way. And I tell them to, go pay attention to your feelings, your emotions. And if you ever have a negative emotion, do you ever get angry? Oh, yeah. Do you ever get upset? Oh, sure, all the time. You ask them these things. And I said, all that's your fear. If you didn't have any fear, you wouldn't get angry or upset or annoyed or anxious or even stressed. You just wouldn't. Your life would be full of happiness. So is your life just all happiness and everything is just great? And they say, no, it's not like that at all. I'm struggling with all kinds of things. And I said, well, that's your fear. Next time you have a negative feeling, trace that negative feeling back to find a fear, because there's a fear behind it. And I send them off. I hear from them like 6 months later, and it's, oh my God, not only do I have fear, but I'm so full of fear, I don't think I have anything else. So they go from, I don't have any fear, no, I'm not afraid of anything, and I don't have any beliefs or anything like that, to, I'm so full of fear, I don't even know where to start. Everything I do, almost every choice I make is pushed by my fear. And then they realize that's more the truth. So then I just tell them, well, just pick one. Just pick one, not even a hard one. Just pick one and work on it till you get rid of it. Something that makes you angry, just pick on that. And they do, and they succeed. And then I hear from them back and they say, oh yeah, it's great. All my relationships are so much better now. And so they start building themselves up, but they start with not any knowledge or awareness of any fear that they have or any beliefs that they have. They think they're pretty much done with that. They've cast off the old religious stuff. They don't believe in, they feel really well put together, but they find out that they're full of fear. Fear, this is not like fear for your life that you're going to be eaten by a bear. This is fear that people won't like you. Fear of not being, good enough, of not being all you could be or all you should be. Fear of not optimizing your potential. fear of being overlooked or not appreciated, fear of people thinking less of you, not thinking more of you. So those kinds of fears are what we're talking about. And you'll find that if you do have negative feelings off and on, then that's your fear. Every one of those is attached to a fear, because if you didn't have fear, there wouldn't be any negativity in your life. If you didn't have fear, somebody could walk up to you and insult you, and it wouldn't bother you a bit. You wouldn't get angry. Anger is your ego trying to pretend that you don't have that fear.
Mm-hmm.
It's you denying the fear, pretty much. Somebody says, "Oh, gee, you really screwed that up, didn't you?" And if you're not fearful, and you have no fear, you go, "Oh, why would you think that? Why would you think so? What is it I did wrong?" And you just be open about it. And they said, "Well, this," and maybe you could explain it to them. Maybe they'd change their mind, or maybe you'd learn something. But you wouldn't have any, kind of a reaction to it because somebody told you that you just screwed up. Most people, somebody says you screwed up, they immediately get defensive. "I did not. No, you misunderstand. You don't get it." They get defensive before they even really know what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
They're ready to fight. Well, that's fear. That's fear. So it's the way most people are. And if you're not fearful, you're always happy. Nothing really knocks you down. That doesn't mean a bad thing couldn't happen to you, but if a bad thing happened to you, you just accept, well, that's it. Life has its bumps and you deal with them. And the reason I'm here is the stuff happens and I deal with it the best I can, with as much positivity and caring as I can. And that's how I deal with it. And if it's a terrible thing that's happened, but you feel like you deal with it the best way that you could, and you feel good about it. And you accept it and you go on. You don't sit around crying and feeling sorry for yourself, and all that stuff is all fear-based. "Oh no, why me? I've been good, I've been trying. Why should this happen to me? It isn't fair." That's all self-pity. You just say, well, okay, sometimes that happens, and you deal with it and go on with your life, and you're cheerful about it because you accept that life is uncertain, and sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. It's just like that, and it's not a thing. So your problems all come from fear.
I've got a last question. Do you teach some techniques? Do you teach meditation or remote viewing or out-of-body experience or techniques to have access to the larger consciousness?
I do. I teach a lot of courses. I've taught hundreds of courses, and the reason I teach them is because I keep telling them, well, you have to have the experience yourself. So they said, okay, help us, help me get that experience. How do I go about it? So I figured, well, that's fair enough, that I should do that. So I do have courses, and I've taken probably the best deal that you can get right now is we've taken all the training courses of all the paranormal things. It's training out of body, mind to mind, remote viewing, healing, all those things, how to do them, what they are, how do they work, what makes them work, what makes them not work, and so on. We took all of that and turned it into one course that's on audio. So on audio, because everybody doesn't have a lot of bandwidth, and video takes up a lot of bandwidth. So we put it on audio so everybody could access it. And it's really not very expensive. I think it's like maybe $100 or something. But it's, when I actually gave these courses in person, because there was a venue and food and all of that, they probably cost like, $1,500 to $2,000 to go to them. But I've distilled all the stuff, all the best questions, all the best comments, all of that stuff's been distilled in this one audio program. which you can get on Soundwise Audible, but you'd go to www.MBT Events. MBT Events is a website for the people that run programs for me. They do all the organizational stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's not me. I don't do organizational things, so I get somebody else to do that for me. And they've put this together, and it's out on Soundwise at a very inexpensive. So take that course. Now it's a course that runs over 5 days. It's a 5-day, all day long, 5-day courses. But on audio, you can stop it and start it as much as you like. You can spread it out over 5 years if you want to. And you can take it again and again and again and keep practicing it until you get it. But it will explain, the whole course was not me leading people to these paranormal events, but rather me trying to teach them and coach them so they could do it on their own.
Mm.
You know, so I don't have, what do they call it? Meditations where you get a voice that leads you through things or to do things. Guided meditation. I don't do guided meditations because I want everybody to do it on their own. So all of mine, I have sounds though. I have binaural beats. It's another thing you can buy. I have a set of binaural beats that they don't cost a whole lot either. I think they'll set of like 13 of them or maybe $25. You know, so they're really inexpensive. I try to stay inexpensive because I'm sharing. You know, I'm not trying to make a lot of money. I'm trying to get it out to people and cover expenses. So you can get these binaural beats, and if you buy the program, actually on Soundwise for the paranormal things, I think a set of binaural beats comes with it. You don't even have to buy them separately. So I have that for teaching those sorts of things. I have another thing. There's sometimes people have problems with developing their intuitive side because their intellect is so dominant that they can't get their intellect to sit down and be quiet. You know, so let's say they're trying to connect, talk to their dead Uncle Fred. So they go into a meditation state and they say, "Uncle Fred, are you out there?" And they hear "Yeah, I'm here." And right away, their intellect jumps in and says, "Oh, what was that? Did you just make that up, or did that come from somewhere else?" Their intellect immediately judges it. Of course, as soon as that happens, they're lost that altered state. They're not there anymore. The intellect will trash, will stop the intuitive process once the intellect gets in, because the intellect is this big and the intuitive is only that big. The intellect's very strong and the intuition is very weak. So the intellect tends to dominate and destroy that intuitive state. So people can only hold it for a few seconds before the intellect interrupts, because they're used to doing, life is like that. Your intellect is always interrupting, telling you, well, you should do this, or you shouldn't do that, or this is a good idea and that's a bad idea. I mean, your intellect runs your whole life. Well, now you're trying to get in this intuitive side, and your intellect is still trying to run your whole life on the intuitive side, and all it does is prohibit you from ever doing anything paranormal. So I have another product, which is called Tom's Park, and it's a training course that you can, it's very adjustable, and you can use it the rest of your life. It's not something you use once and then it'd be redundant. It's not like that. It's another pathway of getting to the paranormal that you don't have to go through meditation. Meditation is the typical path. You want to learn how to go out of body, first you got to learn how to meditate. You have to get the point consciousness first, and then you can go launch into these things. But so many people can't do that I came up with a way that instead of going through the meditation path, it goes through an imagination path. And I've made what happens is you can, this Tom's Park gets you involved in things that you imagine. And if you can get something going in your imagination, particularly if it's got all your senses, it's something you can smell it, you can taste it, you can feel it, you can hear it, you can see it, and you get totally involved in it. What happens is that as that gets interested, as you get completely sucked into what's going on, and what's sucked in isn't a very good word. If you get what's the word, involved, you get connected to what's going on to such a degree, it just takes on a life of its own.
Mm.
The daydream just starts happening. Things happen, conversations take place, stuff happens without you making it all up. It just seems to happen. Well, most of us have that in daydreams. If you do a lot of daydreaming, then you get it started with your intellect, but after you get it started, it just takes on a life of its own and just goes on. Well, when it takes on a life of its own, you have basically gotten your intellect to sit down and be quiet. You've achieved that same point consciousness that you get with meditation. So this is a technique by which you use your imagination and you get very involved in what's going on. So I create this environment that's perfectly safe, but has lots of things to attract your attention and get you focused on things happening. Very interactive, very friendly, very safe environment. And I've made an arrangement with the larger conscious system that when you get to the point where you just let it happen on its own, the larger conscious system will take that, start with where you left off and start giving you a data stream and take you off on wherever it is it wants you to go to teach you something. So that will work and you won't notice it. There's no boundary between it. See, the problem with going through the intellect is now you're here and now you're not here, you're there. And people get all tripped up over that boundary going from here to not here because their intellect says, well, are we here or are we not here? Well, as soon as the intellect gets involved, you're nowhere. You're here in physical reality. So because there's a boundary, the intellect has a hard time getting past that boundary without wanting to examine the boundary. And it keeps people from being successful. This way, there's no problem. You could be 10% your imagination and 90% the larger conscious system, or the other way around, 90% your imagination and 10%, it's a completely, one just flows into the other with no boundary. So there isn't any boundary to grab that intellect's attention like there is going through meditation. And that makes it easier for the people who are locked into their intellect and just can't get past that point, and they don't have the time or the discipline to do meditation, because what the meditation does is it disciplines your mind. You have to discipline that mind so you can put your mind in a particular altered state and keep it there for as long as you want, for half an hour, an hour. Well, most people, it takes 10 years before they can get their mind disciplined that well, that they can go just sit down, go into point consciousness and hang out there for an hour. It's hard for most people. 10 years, 15 years worth of practice. This isn't hard at all. Going through the imagination isn't hard at all. You just have a good time. You get involved in what you're doing, and you get so involved in it that you stop intellectualizing it and just interact with it and let it go. And then the system will start giving you a data stream that matches exactly what you're doing, but then it just kind of lets that roll off into something else, and you can be out, exploring an out of body or remote viewing or doing whatever you want to do, talking to your dead Uncle Fred. And it has a lot of other things within this environment that help you launch into all the paranormal spaces. It gives you process by which you can launch. So it's both of those things. So you go into the physical spaces and start with your imagination. And then as it gets going, then you can migrate into the other spaces that are all connected into the paranormal and encourage the paranormal connection. So that's Tom's part. Now that one is not so cheap. It's $80. Well, that's cheaper than the $100 for the other course, but it's just a book. It's just a little thin book.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it as a book, it's too expensive. Who wants to pay $80 for a book that's only half an inch thick? But if you look at what it is, it's like this training course that will let you get around 10 or 15 years worth of meditation, and you can use it. You can use it just to relax. You can use it to build relationships. It's not just the paranormal. If you are a shy person and you have trouble with relationships, you can work on that.
Mm.
There's people there in this park. There's a lot of staff, and the staff are very personable. So all the little book does is basically reads the rules. Here's a virtual reality. It's a virtual reality that I'm creating. I'm calling it Tom's Park, and here are the rules. So it doesn't take that long to learn about the rules.
Mm.
And then after that, it's yours, and you can make of it whatever you want. You can change it. You can modify the park. It's all of that's allowable. So it's just a really neat way to slip by a decade worth of meditation, and to slip past your intellect in order to get into the paranormal things and go experience the larger consciousness system. But it's out there to experience. I guess an experiencer, I should tell them then, well, they get that. If you get this, you'll get all this information about, how things work and why they work that way. I was going to say, you just get there's just three different sources of data that you can get. That's all, just three. One of them is larger conscious system. The other one is some other IUOC, individual unit of consciousness. And the last one is yourself. You're an IUOC. You can create data and send it, and you can create information. You are an information system. So those three, but there's no tags on it to know which one you have. They just all can be mixed together. You can have just one or the other, or all three of them, or two of them, or whatever. With practice, you get a sense of them. They have a different quality. With practice, you can get a sense of where the data is coming from. But initially, you don't have any sense of it. So you need to just let it alone. Get your intellect to sit down and not worry about where it's coming from, and ask those questions later. So that's an important thing to do, to keep your intellect out of it. So if your Uncle Fred says, yeah, I'm here. Hey, nephew, what would you like to talk about? And instead of your intellect jumping in and saying, what was that? Was that real? Was that really Uncle Fred, or did I just make that up? See, and then the whole point's destroyed. Just go with it. Have the conversation. Spend 15 or 20 minutes talking with Uncle Fred, no matter whether it's which of those three sources it is, or a combination of all three. Doesn't matter. Get experience. Now, after you've talked with Uncle Fred enough hours, now you can judge it. Now trot out your intellect and say, is this useful? Am I learning anything? Is this going somewhere? And if the answer is no, well, stop. Don't just keep throwing good after bad, you see? But the time to judge it isn't as it happens. But the intellect wants to do that very badly, because that's how it functions in our everyday life. It immediately wants to tell you if you made a wrong turn. It immediately wants to judge things and analyze things and give you the results. And we want it to do that here, but that's deadly to your intuitive side. So that's only thing that makes it hard, is we get in our own way. And also a thing that makes it hard is that your own fears will get in the way. If you fear things, if you say, well, if I get out of the body in this reality, what if it's nasty stuff out there? What if something gets me, and you have fear about it? Well, you'll manifest nasty stuff out there. You'll create it. In mind space, you can manifest things just by thinking about them. In physical space, you can still manifest things, but it's not that easy. One other thing I didn't say, we're going to wrap up soon, but one of the things I didn't say is that one of the feedback systems that we get is that your intent, the intent of your mind, can modify future probability. Okay, so future is just probability, possibilities and probabilities. Okay, now you make a choice, and that actualizes one of those possibilities. Once you make a choice, you're going to do something. And when you make that choice, all the probabilities and possibilities have to rearrange themselves, because now had I made a choice going this path, other things would have become possible, and the path I'm on would have been impossible. But the fact that I took this other path, so things change. Those probabilities and possibilities are just coming and going all the time based on the choices you make. And you can modify the probability that go with the possibilities. That's how people heal. That's how they use their mind to heal. That's how positive people, have the power of positive thinking. They can modify future probability. So if you really, really want it to be sunshiny next Saturday because you have a picnic planned, if you put your intent on that, you'll raise the probability that it'll be sunny. But if you're a farmer and you really want it to rain because all your crops are thirsty, well, you then are putting energy into it raining. And all of this adds together, and it happens however it happens. But you can modify probabilities with your intent, and people heal that way. So what they do is they modify the probability that the future will hold better health. That body will be healthier in the future. So they make that more probable, and they make that the body will be more ill or even ill, stay ill. They make that probability less. So that's how the healing works, and that's just a feedback that we get. Because of that feedback, an awful lot of what we see here is we create. We create our own reality in several ways. In the way we interpret the data, that creates our reality, and in our intention, modifies what happens next. To some extent, it doesn't dominate it. You won't always get what you want because maybe it's more probability than you can move. If something's 10,000 to 1 and you make it go all the way down to 100 to 1, you're still probably not going to get it because it's still 100 to 1, even though you've moved it a whole lot because you're a real wizard. It still doesn't happen. So it doesn't mean you get everything you want. It just means you can shift the probabilities to be a little more in the direction that you'd like to see them. Now, everybody can do this. Everybody does do this to some extent. People don't have to know about it to do it. People who are always miserable and complaining and whatever, they tend to make their life full of sad stuff. And people who are happy and positive, they tend to make their life full of good stuff. That it just happens automatically. So if you worry about something and you're a worrier, you tend to put energy into what you worry about actually happening. What you fear, you tend to create. So if you fear that people won't like you, you'll tend to act in a way to make people not like you. You see, it's just the way it's just the way that works. So it's all about getting rid of the fear. So it's really kind of a fun thing to do. But you'll find out that the paranormal stuff is not by itself all that meaningful. But what it does do that's good is it gives you practice trying to focus and develop your intuitive side, which will give you perspective. You'll see a bigger reality. That will give you a little humility because you'll see yourself as just a small part in something very meaningful, yet very much bigger than you are. Instead of you're just some random player in some random physical game someplace that has no meaning, so it will help you see bigger pictures and understand yourself, understand other people. So by getting yourself prepared and able to do paranormal things, you actually grow yourself up. But the actual paranormal stuff itself is irrelevant. It's not fundamentally important by itself. And mostly people who get really good at it don't do it much. Because what happens is that if you did, you'd live in a bubble. If you'd modify future probability and you're good at it, which means you have a lot of power to do that. I mean, everybody does it, but everybody doesn't do it with the same force. If you can get better at it or not be so good at it. But if you're very good at it and you always manipulate future probability to be the way you want it, and your life is kind of a charmed life and everything works out kind of the way you do, you're creating this bubble for yourself to live in. And it's a plain vanilla bubble that is not very interesting place to live, actually. And it makes it very difficult for you to grow anymore because the way you grow is that stuff happens, challenging stuff happens, hard stuff happens, interesting stuff happens, and you have to deal with it. Well, if everything that happens is stuff that you've kind of programmed with your intent, then you've just taken yourself out of the game that you're supposed to be in. You've removed yourself from what's important, which is to deal with the stuff that happens and deal with it positively and grow from it. So the paranormal is fun, interesting. It's even helpful. You can help people who are ill. You can do some nice things with it. But eventually you realize that everything's just about the way it's supposed to be. And most all the problems that people have are self-inflicted, and it's part of their feedback. That pain is part of their feedback to help them turn around and approach things differently. And they really don't need to go around manipulating the world to be any different than the way it is. It's pretty well perfect, just and balanced, just the way it is. And to manipulate things a lot is, who cares? Why bother? Just deal with it. You don't have to manipulate it. And then you don't really use it except for very special occasions. And then you can use things. You can use the paranormal for very special needs, but you don't live with it. So people work at it and work at it and work at it. And when they get really good, they walk away from it. So it's kind of a funny thing, but that's typically the way it works. And the more you grow up, the more you tend to live in the intuitive channel, and the less you live in the intellectual channel. I mean, the intellectual channel is important. You need it. You need those judgments and that analysis and comparisons. They're very important. But in general, it shouldn't run your life. Your life is much better run out of your intuitive channel, because the intellectual channel has this wonderful, extremely precise tool called logic. But unfortunately, to really use deductive logic, you need a lot of information. You need to know all the inputs and how all the inputs connect and what all the inputs do and all the variables. You have to know all that stuff if you're going to use logic for anything very complicated. And you almost never know any of that. So we think we're logical people, but mostly we're just guessing. We're not logical at all. We just think we're logical. So you go over onto the other side, and now your tool is not so precise, because you have to be in the right frame of mind. You have to have quieted the noise. Sometimes you're better at it than others, because sometimes you're very focused on other things. And so it's not the tool at logic. It's always there and it's always ready to go. Now your tool's a little rattier, but the database is exquisite. You've got all kinds of information to work with. You've not only got all those databases out there, but you connect with people, you understand people, you can feel their feelings. Your empathy and connectedness to people and to situations and to things is so much deeper on the intuitive side that you don't need a whole lot of intellect to try to guess from the little bit of data you have. You've got a huge amount of data, and you can live your life much better from the intuitive side than you can from the intellectual side. The intellectual side, by comparison, is kind of sterile. It's not nearly as warm or as caring or as nice as the intuitive side. The intuitive side relates to people and relates to their feelings, whether they don't have to tell you what their feelings are. You just get all that information. You know what they're feeling. You can feel their feelings. So you can be empathetic right off, and you can be helpful, and you can say things that are going to help, rather than your intellect doesn't have any idea what's going on. So it says things that hurt, that create a problem. But it just makes your life easier. So we unfortunately develop that side of us that is the least useful. But it's our culture, if you can really develop your intellect, then you earn more money. The more you can develop that intellect, the more complex functions you can perform, the better you are at solving complex problems, then your culture values you very highly, and you end up in jobs that are very high paying. Whereas if you have a lot of intuition, people call you a space cadet, and make fun of you. And even though you know a lot of things and can read between the lines really good, you can't explain it to anybody else.
Mm.
So you can never convince anybody of anything because you can't explain it.
Right.
Because the intuitive side is unexplainable. It's not rational. You just know. So it's our culture very much favors the intellect. So we all develop that way. And it's unfortunate because think of all the things in your life that have meaning, that are really significant, of all the things in your life that you've done, the choices you made, all the stuff that's significant and meaningful. And almost none of it will be about the stuff, the physical stuff. Mm. It's all on the subjective side. It's not on the objective side. You know, all the important choices. Should I take this job or that job? Should I marry Susie or should I marry Sally? Should I have 6 children or only 2? Mm. You know, all these choices that you make, none of them are about stuff. They're all on the subjective side of things. All the answers there are all intuitive. You don't have any logic that you can apply to any of those things. So all the most important things in your life, the happiness, the caring, the connectedness, the friends, the family, the all of that, even the career, the significance of it is all on the subjective side, not on the objective side. The objective side is all about the stuff. The subjective side is all about the people and the relationships and the connections. So which is more important to you? Well, obviously, the subjective side is where all the richness is. Sure, the objective side is interesting too. You don't want to walk into that tree. You want to walk around it. So it solves a lot of little problems like that. You know, where did I leave my car keys? It can solve lots of little logical problems. And it's nifty to have that. But the side that you live through, that is really the most meaningful part of you, is not the props on the stage. That's the physical world, but it's the actors and what's going on in their minds and how they're relating and connecting, and the story and the meaning of that story and where that story goes. That's what's important, but that's all on the subjective side. That's not on the objective side. The objective side is just the props on the stage, the stuff, the house, the car, you know, that sort of thing. But the meaningfulness, the meaning that is in an act that's no more of an act than just holding the hand can have tremendous meaning. On the objective side, it's trivial. It has no meaning whatsoever. Hands hold. You know, bird flies. It's just not important. But on the subjective side, it can be tremendously meaningful. So that's why I say eventually you realize that learning to develop that intuitive side, because it's your subjective side is where all the real action is in life that matters. And that intuitive side works well with that subjective side. The objective side is just about the stuff and the rules and how all the stuff works. Yeah, well, it's nice to know. It's you need to know that, but it's not where the significance of your life is. So developing that intuitive side is a really important thing to do for people, and it will offer up to them all the paranormal stuff, really, whether they want it or not. Even if they don't want it, they'll use it anyhow. They'll become more intuitive just without trying. They'll become more connected to people and see people at different levels than they did before, just by developing that intuitive side. So you don't have to try to do paranormal things. It all just it's part of being an intuitive person. It's part of being consciousness. We're consciousness. We're not bodies. Yes. Oh, one other point I'll make, and that is, I know this has been a long monologue. One other point I make, though, because people will say, well, if it's just a consciousness, then how come, what if somebody gets hit in the head and has brain damage? The brain, okay, I say the brain's not even in there, right? But you have brain damage. Well, doesn't that brain damage change the consciousness? No, it doesn't. The consciousness plays a character, and it has to play the character according to the rule set. So now the rule set is all our biology. It's part of the rule set. So yes, if you go in and hit somebody in the head and they have brain damage, and now they slur their speech, can't remember who they are, and drag their foot when they walk, well, now you are a perfectly put together, well consciousness, but you have to play a character that slurs its speech, drags a foot, and doesn't know who it is. And you have to play that character because the rule set has given you now a damaged character to play. So that's kind of the interaction between the two. It's not that the physical stuff modifies the consciousness. It doesn't at all. Consciousness is immortal. Your body is mortal. But the consciousness can't do anything more with the player, with the avatar, the player, the consciousness can't do anything more with the avatar than what the rule set allows them to do with the avatar. Yeah. So they have to abide by the rule set. So your avatar lives on junk food and eats 10 candy bars a day, then the consciousness has to deal with an avatar that's can't keep a thought steady in its mind, is totally walking and living in a fog. They have to deal with an avatar like that because of what they eat. So there is a connection between avatar and consciousness, but the avatar doesn't change the consciousness. It just changes what the consciousness can do with that avatar, you see. So actually, for the most part, the consciousness can change the avatar. The mind leads, the body follows. Let's say if you're a person and you're always complaining and kind of negative, well, after about 10 years or so of that, you'll find out that your body no longer makes serotonin anymore. And that you need to take, Zoloft or some pill to help boost your serotonin levels. But it's not because you just got overcome by a terrible disease and lost your ability to produce serotonin. You stopped producing it because you weren't, all of your attention was on that negative side. All of your attention, all of your focus was on that negative side, and positive stuff kind of dries up, doesn't work anymore. So your brain chemistry will change. So that consciousness was sad. That consciousness has a lot of fear. That consciousness was dysfunctional, and looking at the negative side of things, that consciousness will create a problem in your body. And if you're nasty and a mean person and a user of people rather than a carer of people, then you'll end up with cancer. You'll end up with problems. Your back will hurt. Your knees will hurt. Your body will start to come unglued just because of your negativity. So the mind leads, the body follows in many ways, but it doesn't work the other way. The body doesn't change the consciousness. It just changes what the consciousness can do with the body. Whereas the consciousness has a lot of fear. It'll actually modify the body into something less. And if the consciousness has a lot of positiveness, that body can keep on chugging and you may never get sick. You may be 20 years since the last time you had a cold. There's a lot of people like that. They just don't get sick because they're very positive. Probability of them getting sick is just low.
I want to thank you a lot for your time and for your generosity. And I will take care of creating the subtitles for the video in French and to be very clear for everyone. And thank you again. And I will take a little time to do it because it's a long one, but good afternoon to you because I think it's the afternoon for you.
It is. It's 4:30. It's 4:30 here for me. You're in France. That's it's late.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like 11:30 for you, going on midnight. Yes.
That's it.
No,
And
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that.
It was a real pleasure for me. So thank you a lot. And
well, that's good. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
So long.
Bye.